Hi, in this video I'm going to be going through your virtual machines and remote logins laboratory which I've created for the networks class. Now, if you cannot locate the software which is needed for this practical, please use the links which I've provided. Now, this is a two-part lab. The first part is called virtual machines, and the second part, which is much lower down, is called the remote logins. I'm going to go through the practical part so it's easier for you in your preparation for this lab. Okay, so you must study the narratives here that explain what virtualization is, the different software. For example, here it says type 1 hypervisor and type 2 hypervisor. We are going to be using a type 2 hypervisor, and in this case it's going to be Oracle VirtualBox. There are other softwares which you can use for virtualization, but we are going to continue with the one just named. Right, so you must study these terms, and then we come to the practical work, which is what the purpose of this video is for. In the lab, I've asked you to create a virtual machine. This says VM1, Virtual Machine 1, and this is the name for it. It is Windows XP Service Pack 3. These are the attributes for this virtual machine. So I'm going to step you through how to create a virtual machine on your laptop or your desktop computer, and then I'm going to show you the second part of the lab. So let's start with the virtualization. Now, in order to do this, you will be using Oracle VirtualBox as mentioned. So this is what I'm looking for. It says Oracle VM VirtualBox. If it's not installed on your computer, please locate it and install it. This is what the file looks like to be installed. Alright, so mine has already been installed, and this is what the interface looks like. Now let's just have a look at the attributes. We want a host name, Windows XP Service Pack 3. We want a username, there's a password, it says the base memory, processors, hard disk size. Then it says a folder where VM is stored. So we're going to have to create a folder. You're going to confirm that the network adapter is working or at least selected. And then Windows XP will be needing a product key in order for it to be installed. So I provided a product key. Windows XP is now in the public domain as Microsoft no longer offer support for Windows XP. So it's now available. A lot of people still use it because of legacy software, which only runs on Windows XP, and it still falls part of the Windows system, so it's a good sandbox for students. But a little bit later, I will also be asking you to create a virtual Linux machine, and in this case, we'll be using Ubuntu Linux, and that will also be part of this assessment. All right, so let's get started with the first VM, which is the Windows XP machine. All right, in order to do this, I'm going to have a VirtualBox open, and now I need to say new. I click on the new tab, and then it says virtual machine name and operating system. So I need to give it a name. So the name is Win XP Service Pack 3. And then it says folder. Now note, the default is in the C drive. If you look at the attributes which I've specified, it said folder where VM is hosted. It says create a new folder in C drive called virtual machines. So I need to go here and say other, and then I need to go to the C drive, and now I need to create a folder which says virtual machines. So I'll say folder virtual machines, and notice it's on the C drive. Now I can say select folder. So that's what it looks like. Now it says ISO image. Now we are going to be installing this virtual machine using an ISO image. Now what I need is the ISO image of the Windows XP software. Now when we install an operating system, it can be downloaded and put on a memory stick. Now in the old days, we used to use CDs and DVDs to install the software. So we used to call those ISO images. Nowadays, we download from maybe Windows website. We download the operating system onto a memory stick, which then gets plugged into the computer, and the BIOS runs off the memory stick to launch the operating system. But in the old days, we used to use an ISO image, which is a CD or DVD image of the CD that you will, or DVD that you would have got when you purchased the operating system. If you purchased Windows, you would have got a CD with it, and that CD would be put in your DVD writer or your DVD reader in order to be used to install the software. So here we say ISO image. Now I have the ISO image image, so I need to go and locate it. So it says other. Now in the share folder, I've shared the ISO images with you. These are the images of the software. So there is the Windows XP, there is the Ubuntu Linux. If you want to play around with Windows 11, the latest version, there is the Windows 11 ISO. There's Kali Linux, which is often used for a lot of security tests and fault tracing. It's very good for sandboxing and doing your diagnostics and tests. But in this case, we are just using Windows XP. So I just double click on that and then I say next. Now it's saying, what will the username and password be? Now note that I said here, the username is Abacus. So I need to change that to Abacus, and then the password is Abacus 2023. I'm now putting in that password, Abacus 2023, and then this is the host name, and there it's asking for the product key. Now you have two options. You can either put the product key in now, or you can put the product key in later. If you put the product key in now, it will save you a considerable amount of time. So my advice is to copy the product key in now and put it in there. If you don't, it's fine. What will happen is while it's installing, it will ask you for the product key. You might want to see that because most software, Windows specifically, asks for a product key during the installation. And if you have not installed Windows, this is a good trial for you to see how the product key system works. Although Windows 11 is a little bit different, you can install without a product key and then just load a product key later. With Windows XP, you had to have that product key unless you went into the command prompt and entered certain commands, which allowed you to bypass that step just for the install. Okay, moving on. So there I've put the product key in and I say next. Now it's asking me for the hardware. Now a virtual machine is like a computer embedded in a computer. So a computer needs memory. So if we go back to the attributes which I've set for you, I want 10 gigs of RAM, 1 processor, and 6 gigs a hard drive. So it's 10 gigs of RAM. So I can just type in here 1 CPU, moving on, and now the hard drive I only want is 6 gigs. You might just need to do this manually. Then it gives you a summary of all the data, and then you can just say finish. Now notice there it says running, and look at this, it is now running through the setup of Windows XP. This is how Windows XP used to be set up. This is what it used to look like, and there is my virtual machine. Now on your side, you won't have these other virtual machines which I use for my testing and other networking work. Yours will just be the one, and there you can see Windows XP is busy loading. Now just a few tips while this is loading. Notice that I'm not getting the full size here. Now on the top here are very important menu buttons. Now, for example, you've got devices, very important. This allows you to make certain changes to allow you to have a shared folder, clipboard, and things like that, which we will still cover. But what's important now is the view. Notice that this is very small and I want to change the view. So I can go here and say virtual screen. This is the virtual screen. Here it says virtual screen, and notice it's not allowing me to resize it, but I can scale it bigger. So I've already scaled it bigger just like that, and I can even scale it bigger so that you can have a clear view. It says virtual screen, and I can scale it to about 350. In this case, there we go, it is now installing. So I'm going to come back to once it's installed. Now you might notice something already. It says setup will complete in approximately 35 minutes, but when you are doing your virtual install, you'll see that your installation is faster than 35 minutes for the reason that operating systems often run faster and better when they're virtualized. So this is a benefit of virtualizing your operating system. Right, so it has now installed and it is rebooting, and there we can see the Windows XP operating system loading. Now here at the bottom, it just shows you some of the attributes of the operating system. For example, Windows XP had floppy drives. Here is the IDE or the secondary drive. There's the hard drive. The LED is showing you it's busy. And here you can see all the status icons for the machine. Now, I'm not worried about that. I can remove that. And then it's saying display settings. I'm just going to ignore these warnings with tours and all those things. What I need to do now is add additional features. Now, if you have a look at the lab document, it says once your virtual Windows XP machine is set up, do the following. In the VirtualBox menu, go to Devices and select Insert Guest Editions CD. And then it says follow the on-screen instructions to install the guest editions, then reboot. Now, if you look over here, it says Devices. And then it says insert guest editions CD image. Now what that does, it's the software that is going to allow me to have more control and more features for this virtual machine. So I go to devices and then I say insert guest editions CD image. Now just a note, these controls at the top are kind of outside of the virtual machine. This is a VirtualBox's controlling of Windows XP. So Windows XP never had these tools over here, this toolbar here. This is Windows XP, and if you want to go and have a look at it, this is Windows XP. So this over here at the top, outside of Windows XP, are the tools which OracleBox is bringing to my Windows XP. So it's giving me additional control. Now, if we have a look a little bit down, we can see that it says VirtualBox Guest Editions D. Look, it's loaded the drive. You see, there's the D drive and it's loaded this. So all I need to do is double click on it. In other cases, depending on how you set it up, you might find that when you click on devices and you say insert, or you just say upgrade guest editions, it might just do it automatically for you and you just follow the prompts. In this case, I'm just saying yes, next, and then it's asking me where do I want to install it, and just say next, 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 and install it. So this will need to install, which will take a bit of time, and this will give me additional expandability. What I mean by that is it will allow me to say, for example, if I want to copy, say I want to copy this, or say I want to copy a password, and I go like that, copy. How do I put it into the virtual machine? Well, by using the guest editions, it gives me that type of control. Maybe you want to drag a file and put it into your Windows C drive. Here is my virtual machine. There's Windows C drive, and this is my virtual machine. Maybe I want to create a new folder here, and I just say test. And there's a folder in my virtual machine, Windows XP. Now, say for example, I want to put something in here from my host. Now, my host is the machine that is hosting the virtual machine. This is why I require you to go through all the terms here, which explains all of this. The virtual machine is the guest, and my machine that is hosting this is the host. So say I want to go from host to guest. I want to copy a file. Say, for example, I want to copy into the test folder. Well, I will need these additional features that are provided by using this guest edition. So if you don't install the guest editions, these additional features will not work. So we're going to just wait while that installs, and while that's installing, I'm just going to go to the OracleBox and just show you a little bit more about it. Okay, so this is the virtual machine, and this is the specifications of this machine. For example, if I show you another virtual machine, here I have Red Hat Linux, and this is the specifications of that machine. Over here I have a Kali Linux, and this is the specifications of that machine. So each virtual machine has its own specifications and settings. So what I'm going to show you now is the settings for the machine that we've just created. There you can see I've got general, system, display. Now remember that we had just set these. There's the the base memory, the hard drive. Does it have an optical drive? Remember, the optical drive is the CD drive. And then you can see the display settings. I'll come back to the display settings in a moment. There's the storage. Now the beautiful thing is that you can change these settings. For example, you can increase the storage, you can increase the RAM, but only when the machine is powered off. So if I just show you another machine, this is another Windows XP machine. If I go to settings, look at this. I can now say, well, you know what? The memory was too little. Let me increase it. I want to have more than one core on that CPU. Now, you obviously got to keep in mind that if the operating system was never designed for more than one core, it will be silly to have more than one core, for example. Here it's already saying invalid settings detected because maybe at that time the operating system isn't programmed to deal with more than one core. But the point I'm making is that you can actually change the specifications of your virtual machine when it is off. Now, an important one is the shared folder. Maybe you want to have a shared folder. Now, that is also part of the lab, which I do require you to do. So I do require you to create a shared folder, which I'm still going to show you. And then also I require you to go to the settings, and then over here it says general, go to advanced, and there you can see it says shared clipboard, host to guest, guest to host, or bidirectional. That means that you can copy and paste into your virtual machine, which is incredibly useful. And then also the drag and drop option, which you can set. But all of this works only if the guest editions have been installed on your virtual machine. So let's just have a look and see the guest editions are still installing, and then it says, do you want to reboot? And then you can say yes. So you can reboot the system. Look at that. You might even hear the Windows XP sound when it shuts down and when it boots up. And you'll also notice that it shuts down and boots up very quickly, much faster than how it was on an actual machine. Now, here's the virtual machine booting up, and immediately we're seeing a problem. Now, this probably won't happen to you, and this is the reason why I've made the video, is notice that I'm seeing nothing. And this is because of graphics conflicts or settings are incorrect. So at this point, you might have to do some troubleshooting. Now, you might be lucky, depending on the type of host machine you're using. You might not have this problem. So at this point, I'll need to go to view, and then I'll need to say, okay, let me first see if I can resize. That didn't do anything. I must make sure that the machine is running. Is it running? Yes, there's the green icon telling me it's running. So it is on, because it might be black because it's off, but it is running, and I did see it boot. Now I'll do a few more things. I can come over here, change the resolution. It did not change. I can change the scaling. So basically I'm stuck. So I need to shut down the machine. So in order to shut down the machine, I just X here, and then it gives me a prompt. You can save the machine state, almost like a pause, or you can send the shutdown signal. That is like when you normally say shut down, or you could say power off the machine. That is like pulling the plug out. So I'm just going to say send the shutdown signal, and if it doesn't shut down, I will have to just do the power off. So it did shut down, and now I go to the settings, and I will have to look at the display settings. Now the first thing is maybe give it some more memory. If possible, play around with the memory. If you've got more memory available, then also play around with these settings. Maybe choose the next one, maybe enable 3D graphic acceleration. Even though it says invalid settings detected, play around with these and it will probably work. So I can just start it up again and hopefully it will work. All right, so it's still not working. So I'm going to shut down again and I'm going to change the settings again. So I had the 3D acceleration on. I'm going to change that to about there and try again. All right, so now it worked. So just be aware that you might also run into those problems. Okay, so now let's go back to the lab. I then have requested you to go to the VirtualBox main GUI. So that's over here. And then I've said allow shared clipboard from host to guest. So if you go here, settings, advanced, and then it says shared clipboard, host to guest. That means from my native computer to the guest or the virtual machine. And then I said enable drag and drop, which I can do there, host to guest. And then I said, okay. Now I want to do one more thing, and that is create a shared folder. Now there is the shared folder option. I say plus, and then it says folder path. Now in the lab, I've given the specifications. It says create a shared folder in the C drive called shared. So the path, I'm going to scroll down here, other, and I'm going to go to a C drive, and then I'm going to say select folder. So I'm going to have to create a new folder here. and I'm going to call this shared. And there I'm selecting it, and then it says here auto mount or make permanent or read only. So I don't want read only, I want auto mount and make permanent, which is fine. And that means that every time that the virtual machine loads, it will have that shared folder. So if you go back to the machine, I'm not going to upgrade graphics at the moment. I'm just going to cancel this, and notice that suddenly there's a network drive that has appeared and it says shared on VirtualBox server. This was not here before. So if I double click on it, nothing is in that folder. Now, if I go to the share, right, so I'm now on the host, and I'm just going to paste a file in there which says a Cisco Packet Tracer 6.2. So notice that this is now back to the host. This is the computer which is hosting the virtual machine. And if I just say go, you can notice that suddenly the file has appeared, the one I've just shared, because that is what I've requested you to do. It says, now your shared folder and other sharing will work. Copy the Packet Tracer installation file into your shared folder and then run it. So there is the shared, but now because I've allowed drag and drop, I can also drag it into the folder. But if you are having problems, you can also just copy it into the shared folder on the host, and then you will find it in the shared. Now double click on that and install it. Now, once it's installed, you need to do the following. I'm asking you, right, now part of the lab requires you to demonstrate that the copy and paste function is actually working. Now, I want to drag and drop a PC end device here, but I can't see it. It is hidden because of the resolution is poor. You might not have this problem, so you might need to install additional graphics drivers, or you can go to the control panel and then you can look at the settings here. And I can just change this to a higher resolution, and this should resolve the problem. So I'm now going to go back to where I was, and therefore I can now also change the view here. I'm just going to resize the display here. Now you might find that mine and yours looks very different. I'm using a 4K screen, so there are more challenges with a 4K screen. So my host operating system is running on 4K. So what I want you to do now is then install a PC, go to the desktop, and then it says text editor. Now I've asked you to copy all of this, which I request you to know, which are the reasons why we do virtualization in the first place. Now notice it allowed me to copy and paste. So when I come to assess you, I want to see that you were able to get this far. If you can get this far, then you will have passed the first part of this lab. So the rubric is the VirtualBox machine with the correct settings. I can check the settings that I've given you, the hard drive size, etc. Then I want to see that the Packet Tracer was installed, that you were able to share folders, and also that you were able to copy text from the host to the guest, which means that you do have some understanding of some of the device settings. And also you might run into some challenges when doing the lab. I want to see that you resolve those challenges. And there's the first part of your lab done. The next part is quite similar in that you now need to do the same with Ubuntu Linux machine. I have not provided all the steps. You can find that very easily on YouTube, but actually you just need to follow the same steps that I showed in the first part of the video. So you'll say new, and the only difference here is that the ISO will now be Ubuntu Linux, and I have provided Ubuntu Linux for you. If you want to, you can also do a Windows 11 machine, you can do a Kali Linux, but for this lab I need to see the Ubuntu Linux so that I can see that you followed my instructions. But in your own time or your own interest, you can install the other versions of Linux which are provided for you, which you can then go and play with. Right, once you've done that, you call me and I'll assess that. That's an additional 5 marks. Then the next part of the lab is part 2, which is the remote logins. Now this is totally different. This is a second part of the lab, and this is a lab to demonstrate to you that you can remotely log in to another device, phone, computer, server, a laptop, well, PC, laptop, whatever, using a variety of software. For example, there's Microsoft Remote Desktop, which looks like that, and I use this all the time. Very useful. And then there's TeamViewer, then there's AnyDesk, and there's many you can choose from. When I was doing networking, we used VNC a lot in the old days. We used LogMeIn. Anyway, there's a variety of options for you, but for this lab, we are using AnyDesk. So what you'll need to do is you'll now need to follow these instructions. I require you to perform a remote login from one PC to another. Doesn't matter if it's Windows or if it's Linux, or if it's Mac, iOS, or even Android. I just need to see that you can demonstrate an AnyDesk remote login from one computer to another. I also want to see that you can do an unattended access with the correct password. So what that means is that you will need to go to AnyDesk and download the software. Now, I have downloaded the software, which is available, so you can then just use it from the share folder I've provided for you. Double click on that, and then you will get your AnyDesk address. So once you've installed AnyDesk, you will get an address. That is your address that you need to give to the other person for them to link to your desk. That is why it's called AnyDesk. It's like one desk logging into another desk, which could be any desk, as long as you have the address. Now, the address is much longer than that, and you'll provide that person with the address. Now, as long as you both have AnyDesk running, you can then log in to another computer using that address. But then I've asked you to do the unattended access, which is over here on the hamburger button. You click on that, and then you come to something over here which says permissions and set password. Once you've set the password, you can then set the unattended access. What that means is that you are allowing someone to log into your desk, but that also means that you don't have to accept the connection. You see, the way that virtual machines work is that it's most of the time set up in such a way that once you try and get to that desktop, it asks the other person for acceptance. It'll say, do you allow this person to have access to your desktop? And you say yes. But if you set the unattended access, it means that you will always have access to that desktop, even if the person isn't there, and that's why it's called unattended access. So this is a tool on AnyDesk. Other software have different versions of the same thing. So for example, when you use Remote Desktop, they don't have unattended access. What they have is a requirement for you to put the username and password. So if you have that person's username and password, you can then take over. It's as though you are sitting in front of that computer with administrator privileges. Right, so that's something that you can practice. It is pretty straightforward. So practice on 2 machines, and then you will call me to demonstrate your AnyDesk login, and then I'll also want to see if you can do the unattended access with correct password. All right, thanks for watching, and cheers.